All right, should be going. Probably should have cleared my throat before I jumped on. All right, hopefully this is working. Let me know if you can hear me. I'm singing a song, waiting for the thing to pop up. Just making sure it's working. Hey, is it working? There it goes. All right. Cool. Now I am up. Hello, everybody. How is everyone doing this evening? Just trying to get everything set up real quick. Make sure I can see the chat really well. 1 second. There we go. Where'd the chat go? Sorry, I'm trying to pull it up real quick, everybody. 1 second. Apologies if I have a little bit lower energy today, everybody. Just because I didn't sleep well last night, and then my stepmom, of course, whenever I don't sleep well, my stepmom always has a billion things she wants me to run around and do around for their bed and breakfast. So, apologies that I'm a little bit tired today. I downed a monster before coming on here. But I just wanted to have fun and talk with everybody, see how everyone's doing. Hello, Galvion. Hello, Mackenzie. Hello, Pandora. Alex, Jonathan, Seal, Some Random Geek, Just Carowin, Carlisle, Carlisle the Cinephile. I like that name quite a bit. Seal, I've already said hi. Katrina, just want to make sure I say hi to everybody. Pixel Girl, Amanda. I know I missed Maggie, unfortunately, because Maggie went to bed. Chris, hi. Yeah, I didn't have last time you left us in a cliffhanger. What was the cliffhanger? I forgot what I was talking about at the end of the last one. But yeah, no, it's I just didn't sleep well last night. I was up till like 4. I was streaming last night playing some Resident Evil 3 over on Twitch. And then I tried to go to bed after that, but I just couldn't do it. I just was absolutely tired the entire time. So I don't know why I don't know how I'm doing. I don't know. Yeah, words are escaping me. Sorry. Oh yeah, Aaron. Who's your fave Doctor Who companion? Yes. I'd have to think about it a little bit. See, I always kind of liked. Why am I blanking on the names? My brain's kind of dead a little bit. But I always liked, especially when she was with Peter Capaldi. Why am I blanking on her name? She started off with Matt Smith, and then it was a Peter Capaldi companion. She was always one that I really, really loved, but everyone hates on her, and I can't remember who she was. Why am I blanking on her name? I also love Donna. Donna's always great. Bill I love as well. Bill is fantastic. Donna's fantastic, but it was between Donna and or not Amy. Oh, gosh, there's so many. See, this is the hard thing. I can't really decide on all of them. They're all great in many ways. I actually probably would say I didn't like Rose a lot. I like Rose, but she just wasn't my style. Clara, thank you, David. I appreciate that. Clara, I adore Clara. Everyone hates on Clara, but I actually really liked Clara, especially with Peter Capaldi. I also, Amy Pond's definitely up there. Bill I really liked, but I wish Bill had more time, like Alex, I know you just mentioned too. Yeah, if I had to really sit and think about it, it'd probably be a debate between Clara, Amy, and Donna. Would probably be my top 3 biggest Doctor Who companions. Have I seen any classic era Doctor Who? No, I have not. Though I just started literally this week listening to some of the 8th Doctor Big Finish audio dramas. I started going through them. I'm on Dark Eyes 2 right now, trying to get up to like where they're at in the Time War and all that stuff. So, all right. Well, before we get going, I am, today is the official last live stream of the month, and because of that, I am going to be reading some, priority live stream questions. So if you're a Patreon over on my Patreon page at a certain level, I think like $5 or $10, you get to ask me a priority question during the final live stream of the month, which means that I answer your questions first, even though I kind of answered another question there first with the Doctor Who companions, but I want to answer everyone else's questions first, and then I will sort of jump on questions in the live stream. And thank you so much. I just saw Nathaniel Robinson. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I really do. And thank you for calling me beautiful. I didn't put on any makeup today, so I'm like, acne and face looks awful. So thank you for being kind. In terms of that. So I really greatly appreciate that. Let's see. Alrighty. I'm going to pop over real quick to this so you can see the questions. Of course I'll be your friend, Carlisle. Of course I will be your friend. Let's see. Well, thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate that. Thank you for making me feel better about my unmakeup face. Though this lighting setup doesn't really do me any favors here in New Mexico. All right. Well, before we get further into the live stream questions, and I will be responding to live streams as I go, but I want to make sure I answer these questions over here first before we get further for my Patreons. So first up, let me just quick zoom in a little bit. This one's from Christina Dalliance. Thank you, Christina, for being a Patreon. The question here is, what's your perspective on the cosmic horror genre? So I absolutely, really, 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 really love cosmic horror. Like, absolutely adore cosmic horror. The problem is that, number one, cosmic horror's roots, going back to guy who wrote the Necronomicon, H.P. Lovecraft, is really kind of based in, there's a lot of racism in it, which is kind of rough, which makes it hard to read that. But when we get to, like, good cosmic, like more recent cosmic horror, I love that stuff. And I will take the time right here to pitch one of my favorite cosmic horror stories of all time, and that is the Magnus Archives. The Magnus Archives is a podcast that you can listen to, and it is easily, I think probably, if you are a fan of cosmic horror, the Magnus Archives might be the best, at least that I found, the best cosmic horror thing that I have ever listened to, read, or seen. The Magnus Archives is freaking fantastic. Absolutely love the Magnus Archives. The basic conceit of it is basically, I don't want to spoil too much because there is an overarching story, and the chat just stopped. Let me just make sure. Are we still going in the chat? Usually the chat's moving faster than this. I'm just surprised that it froze on me, so I just want to make sure my internet didn't suddenly stop or something like that. We still going in the chat? Because the chat just stopped on me. I'm just gonna quick jump to a website real quick. My internet's still going. Okay, good. All right, just want to make sure the chat was fine. Everyone was just listening to me. Sorry. Good. I guess everyone was just listening. Apologies. I was just like, whoa, the chat just stopped. Usually it just keeps going while I'm talking, so that's new for me. Sorry for that. I guess that was just interesting. Yes, going back to what I was saying. Magnus Archives. I adore the Magnus Archives. It is a fantastic podcast. The basic conceit of it is generally, without spoiling too much, is the Magnus Archives is essentially a paranormal investigative group, but they don't like go out and investigate. It's basically just, it's an archive. So they just have this archive of all this materials that they kind of go through, and they take people's statements and things like that. And you starts off with just one character who's the archivist, who's going through and reading all the story. So each episode at the start is just the archivist reading an individualized story, and the narrator's voice is just fantastic. He has this great British accent, and he's also the main writer. But as the story goes, about once you get like 10 episodes in, and they're all great, they're all like great individual, like just the one-off stories. But then you start to realize that they're all connected, that they actually have little threads going through. And then you start to see a bigger picture going on. And then you start to see like little hints, and then more characters start coming in, more voices. And then you start to see that, oh, there's some really terrifying stuff going on in the Magnus Archives. It's so insanely cool, and it's hard to discuss it without spoiling it, because it does just, you start listening to it and you're just like, oh, it's just individual horror stories with this overarching plot thread. But no, you get far enough into it and you start to see that it starts to have a much more through line story throughout the whole season. It becomes much more serialized in its structure towards the end. And it's in its final season right now. It's 5 seasons. Each season has about 40 episodes, so 200 episodes total. It's in its final season right now, and it is definitely building to a finale, which I really like. And I don't think there's been a single season that has not been excellent. So I would very much recommend the Magnus Archives, and thank you, Some Random Geek, for sharing that. It is so good. I would highly recommend the Magnus Archives. Probably one of my favorite things. I will say it's probably one of my favorite things I've discovered in the past year. Okay. Next question is from Maggie, who unfortunately I know couldn't make the live stream because she's over in the UK. She was hanging out with me last night over on Twitch. Maggie asks, have you ever thought of streaming PC games? Speaking of streaming, I asked because there's a retro-style game called Arian. I'm going to say this wrong. I can never pronounce things correctly. Arianus, which I'd love to see you play/discuss. It's set in a matriarchal city and features a transhuman assassin as its main character. Well, that game sounds absolutely fantastic. I don't know anything about it, but just that pitch right there sounds totally up my alley. Totally up my alley. And don't worry, Just Carowin, you can't, only moderators can, I believe only moderators and myself can share links in the YouTube chat, just because, you don't want to have people like promoting weird stuff. Not that I don't trust you, but someone could come in and just start spamming things and all that jazz. So apologies. Let's see. But anyways, but yeah, that game sounds wonderful. The reason I don't do PC gaming is I don't have a PC. I have this computer right here is a Mac. And I also don't really, this computer, it's a good computer, but I don't have necessarily the best setup to set it up to start streaming that way. And hey, Steve, nice to see you. Good to see you here. Appreciate you stopping by. I hope everything's doing well. So yeah, I do want to do PC gaming more, but I need to figure out how to do that and get it set up. The only streaming I can do right now is on my PlayStation 4, just because the PlayStation 4 has a thing that lets you do it automatically, and it makes it kind of easy, so I don't have to have any like extra stuff, like any extra equipment. It's just the PlayStation 4. Hopefully with PlayStation 5 and Xbox, whatever the Series X, I'll be able to do better streaming, or I might be able to afford some of the equipment. I can't really afford the streaming equipment right now, just because the world. Though I did finally hear back from unemployment literally today. They called me like 2 hours ago, so that's kind of nice. So that's finally good. We'll see how long it takes till I actually get money from it, but I finally got someone to call me, which was fantastic because I faxed in my my form like a month ago. So we'll see how that all goes. And hey, Adam, I didn't see you, or you saw that you stopped by to say hi. But yeah, so that's my answer on the streaming thing. But that game that you just pitched to me, Maggie, if you're watching this in a rewatch, I do want to check out that game. All right, the next one is from Some Random Geek, who I know is down there in the chat. Hello, Jesse. It is I, Some Random Geek, the one radical anarchist communist that Steve Shives will always name drop when he will say, I don't know communism, Some Random Geek will tell you. Well, considering Steve's out there in the in the chat, I'm sure he can say that right now. I will keep this question short because I'm not sure if you're okay with long questions or my long questions. You can make your questions as long as you want. I mean, don't make it like paragraphs and paragraphs long, because then I won't be able to read it on the live stream. But if you have a longer question with a little bit longer of a thought, that's totally okay. Just for future reference for future months. You seem to not like having too much explicit politics in your videos. Is it because the videos don't perform as well, or is it afraid that you'll scare some folks away with your radical politics? Because I can tell you stories of the one time I post a joke meme saying, Mao was right about landlords, and I heard about it all week from liberals. So, yes, good point. And I this is going to take a little bit of time to explain and talk about. And it's something that has changed a lot, is evidenced probably by my more recent videos the past, like, month or two. Perfect timing, Steve, for you to come in and deal with Some Random Geek's question. So, when I started off doing YouTube, I was doing YouTube a little bit before, but to be honest, actually, I started in earnest doing YouTube stuff when I worked at a company called Pride Media, which is a company that makes a magazine called The Advocate. They also make Out Magazine and Pride.com. So they run all those sites, which are LGBTQ-focused news organizations. So I started working there, and that was obviously, that magazine had a definite political bent. But what I found that what I liked doing while I was there was being very educational and teaching about trans issues. Like when I worked at that company, I think I was literally the only trans employee, at least at our Los Angeles office. We had a few other trans people at our New York office, but the LA office where most of editorial was just me. I was the only trans person. So it kind of fell on me to do a lot of like the stuff to write about trans stuff, do trans videos. I was working there as a video producer. And the content that I found myself drawn to was trying to make content that was trying to talk about trans issues and really kind of issues that have been politicized within the LGBTQ space that shouldn't have been politicized, like the mere existence of trans people. And trying to talk about it in a way that was welcoming to people who were maybe more averse, I guess is the best way to put it, to learning about trans people. Like, people were just like, I don't understand trans people. They confuse me. Sorry to use a southern accent, kind of stereotypical, but... So the content that I would make would be trying to be like, hey, look, let's joke about trans stuff. Trans stuff's confusing. It was weird. I don't even fully understand trans stuff. So let's just have some fun and try and learn. And I try to make my content accessible in that way. So then when I came over to YouTube and was trying to do more stuff on my own on YouTube, I wanted to kind of continue that ethos to a degree of being a space where I didn't want to become the enlightened moderate. I'm definitely not an enlightened moderate sort of person, but trying to be a space where like a person who might be initially hostile to point of views just on the face of them, just like, oh, a trans person's in a video, I'm instantly gonna hate this thing because SJW. Just without having any context of what I was talking about whatsoever. So I wanted to try to make content that tried to welcome those people in. And sorry, I'm missing a lot in the chat, but I just want to make sure I explain this because it's a sort of a complicated thing. So I wanted to try and make the content that would like try to be more open to those people as opposed to, and this is something that I really appreciate Steve for. Steve, you're in the chat, but what Steve does on his videos, especially at the time, but even and to this day, Steve is someone who's very much like, if you are people who are Republican, if you support Trump, things like that, don't be in my space. And I really love and appreciate that because when I go to Steve's YouTube channel, that's a space where I know that as a trans person, that I'm safe, that Steve has cultivated an audience that makes me feel safe being there. And knowing that when he discusses things on his channel, I'm not going to feel attacked or hurt or offended or something weird, something awkward's going to come up. Or if something does happen, Steve would be more than open to addressing it. Just to use Steve as an example, there's many YouTubers who do that, but Steve, I know you're in the chat, so sorry to talk about you directly, but that's what I like about Steve's content, and sort of the way he positions his channel. And I wanted to kind of slightly be a little bit different to try and be a space that was safe, but kind of allowed a little bit more discussion. In the sense of like trying to be a space that it enables people who may not necessarily agree with me to maybe see my point of view. So that's kind of why a lot of my videos kind of tried to stay away from being expressly political. But as you've seen maybe in the past, like, I don't know, month, 2 months, I've been getting very frustrated with the world. I mean, I was frustrated well before then. Well before then. But I've just kind of gotten tired and annoyed in a very direct way in light of current events. And I've also found that, like, I just wanted to say more political things. And so I'm trying to make content that is much more expressly political and trying to be much more opinionated, directly opinionated, but also still trying to find a way to do it that's not just like, that still engenders open discussion with people who may not necessarily agree with me. But I also know that I'm going to have to, especially as the channel grows bigger, I'm just going to have to be okay with people not just instantly being like, oh, trans person, awful. I don't know. It's a hard line to walk. And like I said, I'm a little bit tired, so I'm not explaining it completely perfectly. And it's a learning process with any content. I mean, is anyone making content, anyone trying to write, it's a learning process to try and figure out what you want to say and what you want to do and how you want to do it. And so I guess what I will say is this, is that I think as I continue to go forward, I'm probably going to get more and more expressly didactic about my opinions and my views, and maybe be a little less, maybe be a little bit more stringent on the things that I want to say, and a bit more expressive about the things that I want to say. But that I do want to at least still try to make content that welcomes a slightly bigger swath of people than that might disagree with me, and maybe try to change their minds. And again, I don't have the necessarily, if I had the answer to how to do that perfectly, then I probably would be the biggest YouTuber on here. No one does. So that's just sort of what I'm trying to figure out, what I'm trying to do, and also trying to figure out what my desire to write is going to take me. Anyways, that was a really long answer. I hope you appreciated that as some random geek. So I missed a bunch in the chat, so apologies that I might have missed a few things here and there. But yeah, that's generally kind of where I'm at on it, and I'm still trying to figure it out, and we'll figure it out together. And I hope you guys all enjoy the ride as I figure it out and try to learn and try to do better, and try to figure out what I want to say. I mean, part of the reason I do YouTube is to have a creative outlet to learn what I want to say as an artist. And like the next thing, and I'm going to be talking about this probably in a video next month, the next thing that I want to try and tackle is trying to do more fiction. So that should be something that I'll be talking about in a little bit, but I'm trying to figure out what I want to do in terms of fiction, and that's trying to figure out art. Anyways, if you want to call what I do art. I'm an artist. Okay, last question. Joe McClory. My favorite Disney animated movie is Mulan, and I am really interested in how the live-action version will turn out. It seemed like it was targeted at girls, but honestly, it came at a time for me when I felt like a failed young man because I wasn't particularly masculine. And while I ended up taking away the message, gender roles are nonsense. Just be who you want to be, which I completely agree. I was wondering if the themes in the animated film spoke to you at all when you saw it. And by the way, I should say, Joe McClory, perfect timing. You just got in here, and thank you for your question, and thank you everyone for being a Patreon. Some random geek included. I don't think I expressly thanked you when I started reading your question. So Joe, yes, this is. I will actually say, for probably obvious reasons, Mulan is my favorite Disney movie of all time. Period. I adore Mulan. And I am very, very excited for the live action movie. In fact, to be honest with you, it is the only Disney live action adaptation that I'm actually excited about, expressly because they said it was not going to be a musical. And as much as I'm sad that they're not going to make a version of Make a Man Out of You in the movie, hopefully there'll be a little hint to it. But I would love to see that scene in the movie. I am interested that they're going to do something different, because the problem I've had with past Disney remakes was that they were just basically almost a one-to-one remake. Like, they just took the animated movie script and made it a movie and maybe added a few things here and there. But generally, like Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King are pretty much one-to-one. Aladdin was a little bit better, I think, on the back of Will Smith bringing something a little bit different to the role of the genie than Robin Williams, which I really appreciated. Robin Williams, I think, was better, but I appreciated Will Smith doing something different. But anyways, all the films I kind of thought were generally boring. So I am very excited for Mulan because it seems like they're going to try and do something different. And also, one other thing before I get to the meat of your question, one of my favorite, I have two songs that I sing at karaoke all the time. The first one is Kiss from a Rose from Batman Forever, because that's a absolutely perfect song. And the second song is I'll Make a Man Out of You. Whenever I go to karaoke, I will always sing I'll Make a Man Out of You, because I find the irony of a trans woman singing the song I'll Make a Man Out of You to be just absolutely beautiful. I absolutely adore singing that song. It just the irony of a trans woman singing that is just lovely to me. But to get to the meat of your question, and I kind of circumvented it at the top, the themes in the animated film spoke to me when I saw it. Yes, very, very clearly. Like, for me, when I was younger, when I first caught it, the idea of someone being able to, quote unquote, pretend to be in another gender and get away with it, and having people see her as a him, that was a theme that really, really expressed, like, connected with me as someone who, the opposite way, or quote unquote the opposite. I hate using opposites to define sexes and genders, because man is not the opposite of woman. They have much more in common with each other than anything else. But the idea of transitioning and being able to just put on a different gender role, that movie kind of was the first time I got to see that in a sort of big budget way, and in an express way, talking about gender. Like, I think I had seen maybe Jetsia Dax around, or slightly before that time, which was another character who had like talked about gender roles and issues, and she was probably the most influential trans character. But Mulan was the first one that was like very expressly and was about gender roles and discussing gender. So in that way, the film really, really spoke to me. Plus, like, also seeing a female character be a warrior was also just really, really cool for me. Not that at the time when I saw the movie, I didn't necessarily identify in the same way as a woman that I do now, just because I didn't have I was like, I'm a guy and I'm always going to be a guy, but I kind of want to be a girl. Like, wasn't able to process that could be me. But Mulan was like the first animated movie that actually had like a really badass warrior, at least in a Disney movie. Warrior woman. All the other Disney women up until that point have mostly been just princesses, or at least the ones that I had seen. And so seeing Mulan as this like strong warrior woman who also was messing with gender, all just really, 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 really spoke to me. I absolutely, absolutely adored it. Okay, so I think that is enough on that question. So I'm going to hop back quickly to the full screen so you can see my lovely unmakeup face. Oh gosh, I need makeup. Sorry, this is my own dysphoria that you're dealing with. So, and now we're just gonna talk. And oh no, Christy, I'm sorry, I saw that you're going. Sorry, I rambled for a bit, and missed a lot that's going on in the chat. So, I will say I'm gonna hang out for another half an hour or so, maybe 45 minutes or so. But if you have any questions that you posted that I might have missed earlier on in the chat, please let me know, and I will check it out. I saw someone ask, good anime to recommend. I think I talked about this last live stream. I'm not the biggest anime fan, but I think the two that I would recommend most are Death Note. Absolutely adore Death Note. I love logic puzzle type stories where it's just characters trying to like logic their way out of a situation. Those are my favorite things of all time, which is why I like mystery movies like Knives Out and things like that. So Death Note would probably be my favorite. And then the second one, and I think some random geek mentioned it, Revolutionary Girl Utena. That's another one that a friend of mine introduced to me in college. And that one is so, like, a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful show. It's very, very surrealistic, but it also has a great discussion on gender in it as well. It's probably one of the smartest animes that I've ever seen. Just to give you the quick pitch on it, it's about a girl who, when she was younger, she was saved by a prince. And she said she decided that when she grew up, she wanted to be a prince as well, but she didn't want to be a boy. She was very much like, I want to be a prince, not a princess, a prince, but I'm also a girl. And so there's this interesting discussion of gender roles within all of that and what that all means. And so yeah, I guess there's a little bit of lag going on in the I think people are saying there's some lag. Apologies on that. There's not much I can do about that, just because internet is weird here in New Mexico. Which, by the way, I'm going back to Los Angeles middle of this month. My birthday is middle of this month, so I'm staying with family until my birthday, and then I'm going to go back to Los Angeles middle of this month. So in terms of what that means for all of you, is that my internet will get better. So that'll be that. But yeah, Utena is fantastic, and so thank you, some random geek, for sharing that. Apologies if the internet gets a little bit choppy. So let's see. All right, any other questions? I'm up for more questions. Yeah, and apologies for a little bit of lag. Someone mentioned, I think someone asked, I think I may have missed it, just from her, to avoid the Netflix live action adaptation of Death Note. I will say, I don't hate the live action Death Note movie. It's not as good as the show, and if you haven't watched either, I would just say watch the show. But I still kind of enjoy it, mostly off the back of Willem Dafoe. Like Willem Dafoe's Riku, I think is the demon's name, is really, really good. And there's a couple scenes in the movie that are really great. But it's not the best, but it is not the worst anime adaptation that I have seen. So I would definitely say that. Summer Week, I don't think Mulan is canonically a trans man. Because I don't think she identifies as a boy. She definitely takes on aspects of like male, masculine gender roles, but I don't think she identifies as a man, so I wouldn't necessarily qualify her as a trans man. But that is also not for me to say. Anyone can identify the way they want to. So if she ends up identifying as a trans man, that's cool. Hey, Council of Geeks, how are you doing, by the way? I will answer your question, but I think someone else had a question too first that I want a quick answer, and I'll answer because what's the worst adaptation is a good question. I have to think about that one. There's a ton of complaints about bad representation. This is from Gortha. Apologies if I said that wrong. There's a ton of complaints about bad representation, which I do get. Can you think of an example of such that's at least forgivable in that the effort made excuses of any bad impressions inferred? Can I think of a good example? I would say the one that instantly comes to mind, this is probably not the best example, but the one that just for some reason just instantly comes to mind because I was talking about it with someone else, or I think I wrote about it. It's in a video that I wrote about, but it's the episode The Orville, about a girl. I think it was like the second or third episode of The Orville. And I like The Orville. I think it's a fine show, and I think it's gotten better over time, even though I think it's still a little bit not as risk-taking and progressive as others. Thank you very much, Adam. I really appreciate that. And thank you for stopping by. You are awesome as well. But in that episode about a girl, the intention of that episode was trying to talk about trans issues and women's issues. But if you watch the episode, they really kind of mix up women's issues, women's rights issues, trans issues, and intersex issues. So they all kind of like, it all kind of gets a discombobulated mess. And as a result, the episode doesn't necessarily represent trans people super well. And it also just like makes weird arguments for women. Like they talk about like strength of women, like women being physically stronger, and so they bring on this character who's a woman who, like, because of the gravity that she's in, she's able to throw things further, but then they make the argument of like, oh, well, on your planet, the men on your planet are stronger. So it just kind of like makes weird arguments and weird messaging. And I would say that generally that is a bad representation, but it is a well-meaning one. And it's something they develop later on. The intersex story does continue to crop up. And I do like that they develop it and they address it. And so I think going back to your initial question of bad representations and examples, well, Katrina, the reason why no one brings up the existence of intersex people is because the writers probably didn't even realize intersex people were a thing, or were very not clearly aware of it, not aware of it enough to talk about. So I think what I would say about bad representation, when we talk about bad representation and the things that I get angry about when I talk about bad representation, I will say, to kind of overgeneralize, I do not think that any representation is perfect. Just because when you talk about representing somebody, like a trans person, for example, in a story, that trans person can't represent every type of trans person. And it's not going to get every single thing right about trans people, even if it's written by a trans person. If I write a trans story and I write about a trans character, I'm not going to get everything right. I might screw something up. I might offend somebody. I might do something that's not going to be right for somebody. No representation is going to be perfect. So what that means for me is, what it comes down to is how well researched are they? How involved did they have people of that identity in the work? And not saying they have to, but it usually helps when you have someone of that identity involved in the work, discussing and learning and growing from it, and helping to help write it. So intention, involvement of the people, and then also if they screw up, how willing are they to acknowledge it? If if someone writes a story about a trans person and they do it and it ends up being wildly offensive, then... Sorry, my brain just froze for a second because I'm tired. So my brain's just like, rah! If they, and it turns out to be wildly offensive, I'm more willing to forgive somebody if they come out and say, like, hey, this is the problem. And especially if it's like a TV show and they kind of address it over time and continue talking about it over time. And trying to fix the character or discuss the character. Now, there's always exceptions and differences and things like that, but I think that's generally sort of my rule on bad representation. And some people are mentioning Sense8. Yeah, I will say probably the best trans representation, in my opinion, of any trans character in anything ever is Sense8. Nomi in Sense8 is freaking amazing. And yes, Louise Richardson. I have seen Nicole Main's Supergirl Dreamer. And I adored her. I think I talked about her in another live stream, and I really do adore her representation in Supergirl as well. So yeah. Wait, Council of Geeks, have you not seen Sense8? See, now it's my turn to be like, Sense8 is probably my favorite show of all time. If I had to, and I know I'm saying as a Star Trek fan, if I had to pick a show that I loved more than anything, it would probably be a debate between Battlestar Galactica and Sense8. And in terms of my sensibilities, I think Sense8 is probably just fits my sensibility so well. Yeah, Sense8 is freaking fantastic, and in my opinion, the best representation of a trans woman. So yes. Though I will also say, I mean, and I guess her representation isn't problematic, but something that you, like, this is the problem when you have a trans character on a show who she ends up becoming a representation of all trans people, is there's a lot of parts of the transgender experience that we can't represent. She can't represent she's from her parents don't really accept her, but she generally seems like she's well off and privileged, and has money to back herself up. And she can't necessarily talk about the experience of, like, women of color, and not that all characters can be all things, but that sort of discussion about, like, representation and things like that. To sort of get back to what I was talking about, like, quote-unquote bad representation. Not that I think Nomi was bad, but she can't represent all things, and so that's sort of an issue when you're talking about representation. All right. I think Council of Geeks asked a really interesting question, but now I'm trying to, like, think, but I don't know if I can think of one right off the top of my head. What's the worst adaptation of something that you love? I don't know if this is the worst. I'd have to, again, sit down and look at a list. But one of the ones that I was most disappointed by was The Hobbit. I was really, really upset. Not by the first two Hobbit films. I didn't love the first Hobbit films, that I kind of, like, once I kind of got what they were and was like, these are not going to be great films. They're just going to be films made to enjoy the ride of being back in Middle Earth again. And they're not the movies that I wanted to have been made. I mean, I love The Hobbit. I don't know if you can see in the camera here, but I have a Hobbit tattoo lit on my shoulder. It's my favorite book of all time. And so seeing the Hobbit movies was a bit frustrating, but I kind of got into it for the first two. But that third Hobbit movie is so bad and so frustrating. It just really, 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 really just frustrated me. That whole last movie just kind of really frustrated me for a myriad of reasons. Mostly because they tossed away the Thorin Oakenshield. It's actually one of my favorite characters in that story. And in the third one with Thorin, they actually had set up his character so well to have this great arc of his character of being like a person who we could invest in, who seemed like a really good guy. He sort of befriends Bilbo, but they set up this, like, character flaw. If he can get greedy, he can kind of get full of himself. They had properly set that up in the first two films. And so I was going to the third film, I was like, oh, that's going to be his character flaw, and it'll actually work well and pay off. And then in the third movie, they just like, nope, it's just dragon madness. There's dragon madness, and that's what makes him go crazy. And I'm like, wow, way to toss away all your character stuff for stupid, annoying character development. And way to toss away all your character development for something just dumb, like dragon madness. And then the rest of the movie is just one long fight scene that just got so dull and boring. So yeah, the third Hobbit movie is probably my most frustration. And also, I will say, in the second movie, the thing that I was most upset about was Mirkwood. Mirkwood, when I was a kid reading Mirkwood, like the going through the forest, And also I had an audio drama that I really loved that was just terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. I adore the Mirkwood section. It's so scary. And then the movie is just kind of played for laughs. And again, that's a decent way to take it. I'm not saying that the way I imagine it has to be the way that they go, but it was just so sad to see this thing that was just so influential in my love of horror as a kid. Like, I think more than anything, the Mirkwood sections developed my sense of love of horror more than anything else. And so to just see it in the movie just played for laughs just kind of saddened and frustrated me. But alas, I've ranted about that for a time. Yeah, and I agree with Council of Geeks. The Hobbit movies did destroy the New Zealand film industry. Yeah, Lindsay Ellis, as Council points out, did a really, really wonderful... I think that's probably the best documentary that's been done on those films. Excuse me, is the Hobbit movies. Lindsay Ellis did a great discussion. And I think I missed way back Ringworld. Oh, two super chats. My apologies. I kind of got ranting and I missed 2 super chats. Factual opinion, a good cosmic horror is Tim Curran's Dead Sea. That's good to know. I'm actually looking for a good horror book recently. I will check it out. Thank you so much, Factual opinion. Thank you for your super chat. And then Ringworld, good to see you as well. Colder World by Charles Strauss is just a short story, but it's very good cosmic horror and free online. Good to know. I'm actually just about to start reading a Charles Strauss book. I think that you recommended actually Ringworld over on in one of my in my Discord. That I'm just about to start. So I'm actually very excited. I'm glad to see that he does some cosmic horror stuff. All right. Let's see. Yeah, and I agree, Galvion. Freeman was awesome. Cumberbatch did a really good job. I love the videos of, like, Cumberbatch pretending to be Smaug the Dragon. And just, like, you see him, like, crawling around like the dragon. It's kind of hilarious. But I think he did do a strong job. There's stuff to love in the Hobbit movies. I don't think they're a complete wash. But they're definitely not as good as they could have been. All right, let's see. Oh, and hey, this Glorious Clockwork, how are you? I do want to read The Three-Body Problem as well. I know that that's a big Chinese bestseller. And I do want to read more international books. I've been reading a lot of American books lately, and I need to sort of break out of that shell a little bit. And it's good to see you, This Glorious Clockwork. Which, by the way, I saw your message earlier. I will get you on at some point where we can talk. But it is, but not this week, but next week, hopefully we'll figure it out. Let's see. This is from Tom Moore. Ignoring Trill because that's 2 species in one. Which species of Star Trek do you identify with the most and why? Oh man, you're taking away my my Trill. The Trill is always my favorite. I don't know if identify with is slightly different, because I think if it was my favorite Star Trek species outside of the Trill, I would probably say Andorian. Number one, because in the books they have more than one gender, and you know me. If it's about gender, I adore it. They have 4 genders, not more than one gender. They have 4 genders, or 4 sexes, I should say, not genders. But at least in the story, they acknowledge more than 2 genders, unlike most of Star Trek. But they have 4 sexes in the books, and I thought that the way they kind of discussed that was really, really cool. They'll kind of oversimplify because it said there's 2 male genders or 2 male sexes and 2 female sexes. And that's it. And it's kind of oversimplifying it. But I do like that idea. But I also thought the Andorians were a warrior race that was much more believable than Klingons. I don't really like Klingons all that much in Star Trek. There's a few exceptions to that. But I don't really like the Klingons just because I kind of find them a little bit one note for the most part. And the warrior race thing kind of becomes unbelievable at certain points. Like, it's like, how do you have a whole empire based on, like, the way that you conquer things and destroy things? And, like, I just don't understand how their society even exists to the extent that it does. It feels like they would just be, like, kind of a cannon fodder race. That someone else would have come and dominated, and then it just would have made more sense from a logistic point of view. Not to say that that's the right thing to have done, but it just surprises me that they were able to get so far just based on the monoculture that we see of them in the show. Then, like, I very rarely, I think there's only one episode of Enterprise where you even see, like, a Klingon scientist. So I just find that kind of frustrating. The Andorians, on the other hand, were a warrior race that was much more believable. Like, they were definitely much more militaristic, much more, like, willing to fight somebody, but it felt a little bit more believable. Felt a little bit more like I could understand how the Andorians got to where they were. And then the gender thing on top of that was just much more interesting. But if we're talking about just species that I personally identify with that aren't the Trill, I would even have to go with, if I sat and thought about it for a little bit, I would probably even have to say Kelpians. Saru over on Star Trek Discovery. Because I think his discussion of like fear and all that stuff really speaks to me as someone who struggles with anxiety quite a lot and struggles with social anxiety. So I think if I couldn't talk about Trill, I would probably most personally identify with Kelpians. Just because I think the discussion of anxiety that species brings to the table might be my personal favorite. And Nate, you say Denobulans. I love Denobulans, especially Phlox, and I love that they're polyamorous. And I'm sad that their polyamory are often played for jokes, though not always. I'm doing an Enterprise rewatch, and they do actually discuss polyamory pretty decently a couple times through his character, and pretty lovingly. So I actually really appreciate that. I'm sad that it was framed as like an alien culture, but I do really appreciate that they discuss polyamory pretty well with Denobians. But I don't know if I necessarily identify with Denobians as much, just because they seem fairly socially well-adjusted, and I am not. I just don't have that like, oh, I can be like the life of the party every single time. He's very, very extroverted. And maybe that's, I'm kind of extrapolating that to his whole species. I'm sure not every Denobian is extroverted, but I just don't think... I don't think that I personally identify with them, even though I love them. And I saw another super chat. Kaylee O'Hara, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Would you help me to promote queer artists who make pride pins? Yes, for sure. I always want to promote stuff. Please, if you have people that you want to promote or anything like that, I think I've said this a bunch. Number one, I should say there's a charity link. Some Random Geek shared with me the same charity links that Some Random Geek shares over on Steve's channel. So if you want to be able to help out anybody during this current financial crisis and everything going on, there's charity links down in the doobly-doo. So please check that out to help anybody out down there. But as I always said, if you want to have me promote something, I'm always happy to promote people. The best place to do that, though, because I can't always do it on my YouTube channel, just because I gotta help the algorithm and focus on things that I hope will do well and things like that. Unfortunately, just general promotion doesn't really do well. But if you message me over on Twitter, I'm more than happy to promote people, to share stuff out, to say, hey, look at this cool person doing this cool stuff, or this person's in need. So that's an open offer to any and everybody. But yes, I am more than happy to help promote people. I just give me their information beforehand, just because I usually like to check out stuff before I promote anybody, just to make sure that it's not anything skeevy or anything bad like that. Not that I think you would do that, but I just want to make sure that if I have a platform, I make sure I use it properly. So happy to promote people, but just send it over to me on Twitter. Twitter's probably the best place for me to help you out on that front. And thank you again for your super chat. Doobly-doo, just Caro and Doobly-doo. I hear another nerd fighter. I actually got Doobly-doo from Philosophy Tube. I'm sure it originated somewhere else, but I originally got that doobly-doo idea from Philosophy Tube. And it looks like Kaylee. It looks like Steve says he's open to help promoting as well. So, and yeah, Steve is always wonderful in promoting people. Let's see. There was another question that I saw that I was really, really cool with. That I wanted to answer. Where was it? Oh, do you have any Star Trek novels that you would recommend to learn more about the Andorians? Good question. First one that I would recommend, I forget the exact name of the book, but it is in the Typhon Pact series of novels, which took place after Star Trek Nemesis. And you can generally pick up any of these Star Trek books after Nemesis, and they do a decent job of explaining. I mean, there's a continuing story thread, and it's nice to read them all the way through. But generally, the authors do a good job if you pick up a random post-Nemesis Star Trek novel that you can sort of learn things. But there's a really good Andorian novel that it's part of the Typhoon Pact arc, and let me see if I can look it up right here. Pact series. It is called Pass of Disharmony. So Star Trek Paths of Disharmony. So if you want a really good Andorian novel, I would recommend Star Trek Paths of Disharmony. That one really focuses on Andorian situation, gets into the weeds of the politics of Andoria, and also discusses their gender situation. So if you're looking for a really, really, that's probably my favorite one. There was just a couple Deep Space Nine books on Andorians. I think there's one that's called Worlds of Deep Space Nine Andoria, so you can pick up that one. But I think probably the best that I've ever read is the book Paths of Disharmony. That's the one I would definitely recommend. And Nate Olson sent another super chat. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. You're awesome. Thank you so much for your generosity. I really appreciate that. Let's see. Who's your favorite TOS 1 episode character? Ooh. I mean, if I was cheating, I mean, I'd have to look at a list. If I was cheating, I'd have to say Sarek, but he came back in other episodes, but he was only in one episode of the original series. I would even have to say, to still go with Mark Leonard, I forget the name of the Romulan, but the Romulan character that he plays in my favorite episode of the original series, Balance of Terror. That's my favorite TOS episode, period. And I forget the name of the Romulan that Mark Leonard played, the actor who also played Sarek. But I really loved his Romulan character there. I loved their introduction, that they were villains, but they shared a respect and an intelligence and like a mutual sort of admiration with Kirk. So I really, really quite liked his Romulan character in Balance of Terror, but I'm blanking on the Romulan's name, if anyone can help me out there. Yeah, I think that would probably be my favorite one-off appearance. I'd have to go back. I'm working my way back. I'm doing the original series rewatch just for my Sacred Trek series. So I probably am missing someone. There might be someone I liked more, but I think Mark Leonard's Romulan character might be my favorite TOS one-off character. All right. Let's see. Yeah, I'm sorry if I butcher your name. Olam Drab? Apologies if I said that incorrectly. But you say, I don't really care so much for their take on Andorians. They're like, you needed 4 sexes to say how you breed is destiny. Why not just have a poly culture with bi people in different roles? I kind of agree, but what I do agree that sometimes science fiction, and I've talked about this with like talking about allegory issues before, in the idea of like using aliens to create like, ooh, crazy alien societies, and it doesn't necessarily really represent people and makes people who are bisexual or polyamorous feel like they can only be represented in alien cultures. So I've done a video on that with Council and Steve, by the way, to shout them out. But what I will say is the idea, and they don't really do this super well in the books, and I wish they did, because like I said, they have 4 sexes, but they generally just say 2 of the sexes are male sexes and 2 of the sexes are female sexes. And so it's still kind of binary roles in that. But I like the idea of a culture based on 4 sexes, and I would love to write a book like that, because I feel like so much of our culture today is very binary identified, because partially going out of like, oh, we have men and we have women, and those we see sort of those roles as opposites, and sort of all of our, not completely, but I think a lot of like our way of seeing like, you're a Democrat, Republican, you're this, you're that, you're gay, you're straight, all kind of stems a lot out of sort of gender and gender roles and our sort of simplistic view of gender. So I always was curious about the fact of, what if you did create an alien race that did start off like way back in hunter-gatherer times with more than 2 sexes? How would that completely radically change culture? Where like, instead of in an argument, when we have an argument, when we have debate teams today, you see like, oh, 2 sides of an argument. You have this side and that side. But what if you have a culture that builds out of like, every argument has 4 sides? How would that completely change things? And how would that completely change how a culture views themselves? I think that would just generally be a really cool concept. It'd be a really difficult one to like completely create a culture from scratch that sees things from 4 points of view. It'd be very, very difficult to do. But it would be such an interesting challenge to do. And I see we're now talking about best one-off characters, the Brown Tribble. Yeah, we know the one. Oh gosh, Tribbles. Uh, what's the tribble in The Trouble with Edward? The one that like Edward manipulates so that it would be born pregnant. That's my favorite tribble. I loved The Trouble with Edward. I had some problems with it here and there, but that short trek is just a lot of fun. Let's see. Taking a look at kind of lost track of the chat for a little bit. Steve says, Commodore Decker is a favorite one-off character of mine. I love the actor. I love to cry out, don't you think I know that? They used to be, but not anymore, randomly throughout the day. Oh, that's absolutely fantastic. I haven't watched the Doomsday Machine in quite a while. So I don't remember Decker as well. Though I think, like, wasn't Decker, Captain Decker over on Star Trek: The Motion Picture supposed to be his son or something like that? And they didn't, like, make that expressly stated in the movie. But I think that was the intention. So. This glorious clockwork, and you could pack it up more symbolically, like how much of our society is influenced by the fact that we have one sun and one moon. That duality is rare and wild. Yeah, that is very true, actually. Yeah, what if we had like a planet that had like 4 moons? How would that change things in our discussion of stuff? Yeah, it's such an interesting stuff. I would really love to see more like cultures based on like multiple genders. I think the only example that, I'm sure there's more, but I think the best fiction written about like multiple genders and species and like changing genders was Ursula K. Le Guin's The Left Hand of Darkness. And hello, Alden. Welcome to the chat. The problem with Left Hand of Darkness, I really like it, but there are species that I think changes gender over time, but she still wrote it with like very male pronoun focus instead of like having gender neutral pronouns or different pronouns. And that was sort of an element of the time. When she wrote it, that like the problem that I was talking about was she just didn't have the cultural awareness of gender. And so even though Ursula K. Le Guin, I think, is one of the most interesting writers when it comes to gender in fantasy and science fiction, even she just is a product of her time. And I mean, that's all fiction. But I think that's probably the only one that I can think of right off the top of my head that is a very like gender-focused science fiction story. So, Captain Terrell. Hey, awesome vid on the Babylon 5 pilot. If I can, I'd like to recommend the British classic sci-fi Blake 7. Everyone says Blake 7. I've never seen it too. I need to watch that at some point. I also need to watch just generally more non-American centric TV shows and movies and things like that. Well, movies I'm generally good about movies. TV shows I don't really watch too much. I don't really watch too much outside of American, a little bit of British here and there. But I should probably... everyone keeps recommending Blake 7. So. Ursula K. Le Guin is a comrade. I actually just wrote a video. Ursula K. Le Guin is probably my favorite writer. I would have, again, another one where I have to sit down, but she's definitely up there. The Earthsea books, especially The Tombs of Atuan. The Tombs of Atuan book is probably one of my favorite books of all time. I adore Tombs of Atuan, and I actually... 2 things I'll say on Ursula K. Le Guin. There's a wonderful documentary about Ursula K. Le Guin called The Worlds of Ursula K. Le Guin. It is a fantastic film. I caught it at a film festival in Seattle about a year or so ago. And she's absolutely wonderful. And she's also a good example of what I was talking about earlier with bad representation. The Earthsea books are actually very sexist in how they were written. And that actually wasn't something that Ursula K. Le Guin talked about. That she didn't intend that. And she's a very feminist writer. And so she looked at her work of Earthsea years later and was like, wow, there's a lot of sexist stuff in here. Like, only men can be wizards and witches are looked down upon. And they're sort of like these like crazy women in small towns. And so she wrote the book Tahanu, which was like her 3rd or 4th book in the series that she wrote like 20 years after the series ended that addressed all those concerns. And so I liked how she critiqued herself and then took the representation she made and made a story out of it discussing the sexism involved in the Earthsea books. And then I'm also, the last thing I'll say about Ursula K. Le Guin is I actually am writing a video about the Earthsea. I think I just finished writing it yesterday. I have to do a rewrite of it, but there's a video I'm going to be doing about the power of names using the Earthsea books. So I hope you all enjoy that one. I'm actually very excited about that one. Dairy Girls. Everyone's talking about like British shows that they want to recommend. Being Human. I didn't catch the British version of Being Human. I caught the American version of Being Human years and years ago when it was first on. And I liked it. I really like, why am I blanking on the actor's name? The guy who played the vampire in Being Human, the American version. He was Crashdown in Battlestar Galactica. He was in Star Wars. He was Darth Maul, the voice of Darth Maul in the animated shows. I met him too. I met him once. I was interning at a company and I met the actor who played him, and I'm blanking on his name. Why am I blanking on the actor's name? But anyways, the actor in the American version of Being Human I really liked. I should probably watch the British version because according to Seal they are. Sam Witwer, thank you, Fabian. Sam Witwer, he's a great guy. I love Sam Witwer. And please do Seal. I'd love to see the differences between the two. But yeah, I do want to watch. I should watch the British version. There's so much to watch. There's so much I have to watch. And I'm trying to also do rewatches of stuff too. So let's see. Jess Carowin. Oh, a bit about true names. I've got to catch that. Yeah, I hope it'll be good. It's a discussion about true names, and I connect it to like transgender issues of namings and things like that. And talking about like dead names and things like that. So I think that'll be yes, Force Unleashed. That's the other one that he was in. I knew there was another Star Wars thing that he did. So yeah, I do recommend where my brain just dying again. Sorry. I'm gonna go for another 15 minutes. I was actually very tired when we started the chat, but weirdly being on camera gives me energy. So talking with everyone here. Sorry, I'm like slowly like becoming more and more off to the side of the camera here, aren't I? But I'm getting energy from talking with you all. So I will talk for about another 15 more minutes, and then I'll probably cut off. Some Random Geek, I like the Tales of Earthsea anime movie. I won't say it's a good movie, but I like Studio Ghibli's Tales of Earthsea. I actually haven't seen it, just because the Earthsea books are some of my favorite books of all time, and I heard it was not a great adaptation of it. And so I'm always sort of like, I don't know, I don't want to jump in and hate it. But I've also heard, I've also recently heard very beneficial things towards it. So I would say I would probably say that. Favorite non-Trek Star franchise. So it has to have Star in the title. Gate, Wars, Battlestar Galactica. So if it has to have Star in the title, I think my favorite show of all time, besides maybe Sense8 and Battlestar Galactica, the newest one, could probably duke it out for my favorite science fiction series, favorite series in general of all times. You'd probably put them in a ring, and depending on the day, the different one would win. But if I'm talking about franchise as a whole, I really, really love Stargate. The Stargate show is just so much fun. Every time I put on any episode of Stargate, I just really, really enjoy. I don't think there's as much meat on the bone as Star Trek has, in terms of like many issues that I could talk up about, like didactic politics and social issues. Not that Stargate didn't have that, but I definitely think that I don't think there's as much meat on the bone. There's some, because there's discussion of religion and things like that, which is something that Star Trek totally misses. I think there's a lot more discussion on religion in Stargate than Star Trek does. But anyways, I love and adore the Stargate series. Stargate Atlantis is probably my personal favorite Stargate show. Just because I love Rodney McKay. Rodney McKay is one of my personal favorites. And yeah, I know someone just mentioned, I never mentioned Stargate. I know, it's just because I've been so enamored in Star Trek in the past few years, and that's what my channel does well. I should do more Stargate stuff, but I have to do a rewatch because it's been a decent chunk of time. I think the only time I really watch Stargate anymore, and I do watch it fairly regularly, but the only time I watch it anymore is like at night if I'm tired or just want like something fun. And I also have to say, there does happen to have to be... I did watch the Stargate cartoon, Stargate Infinity. Yeah, that's Stargate Infinity was just a really fun, weird show. Yeah, I do want to. I will also say I do want to make sure I leave some things for myself. The big problem I have when I do YouTube channels, and I know I mostly focus on Star Trek, but a lot of the time when I do content and I watch stuff, I'm like, oh, how could I, monetize this or make something productive out of it? And so there's some things when I make stuff I want to be like, I want to make sure I have something that I kind of keep separate. so that I'm like, oh, I can just enjoy this just to enjoy this. Like, even when I watch Star Trek now, I kind of have to put analysis mode on. Like when I watched every episode of Star Trek Picard the first time, Star Trek Discovery the first time, I had to kind of have to sit there with a notebook and can't just enjoy it just to enjoy it. And I like doing that. I like analyzing and reviewing stuff. That's part of why I do this. But I also like to have some stuff where I can check off, and Stargate has been that for me, so I don't want to do too much on Stargate. But I do think I should do a video on Stargate at some point. At the very least on Rodney McKay, because Rodney McKay is so easily one of my favorite characters. Just that he's the perfect lovable jerk. Like someone who is just a hair to, like, he's one of those characters that's just so hard to write, where he's an asshole and you know he's an asshole, but you still like him anyways. You still just kind of enjoy him, like enjoy watching him, and you still kind of have empathy for him and feel for him just because he just does the right thing every once in a while. So I think that's why I really like McKay. He's just that perfect level of like lovable asshole that is just so hard to balance out. So yeah, Rodney McKay is great. First watch for enjoyment, second watch is for analysis. Yeah, except for Star Trek, unfortunately, just because when I watch Discovery and Picard, literally I'm taking notes as I watched it, the first one through, so I can jump on and do a review of it immediately. So Librarians is a great show. I want to watch Librarians. I've always heard good things about it. That it's a very Indiana Jones-esque show, and I could definitely use an Indiana Jones-esque thing. Would you have voted for Baltar or Roslin for colonial president? Oh, that's a no-win. That's a no-win question there. They both kind of had their problems. I think Roslin ended up being the right choice. I mean, Baltar clearly was awful in the end. But I do also think Baltar got a lot of flack in the show. But Roslin definitely had a much more authoritarian streak in her. That was definitely very, very, very problematic. But yeah, neither of them were great. Neither Baltar or Roslin. I probably would have voted for Roslin. But neither of them were perfect. Did you hear about Ruby Rose leaving Batwoman? Yes, I did. It's one of those that's sad. I did like her portrayal as Batwoman. I thought she was very enjoyable as Batwoman. I didn't love Batwoman all that much, to be honest with her. But I really liked her portrayal. So it's sad to see her go, but I understand that there was some like she didn't really like being there. And she didn't really enjoy working on the show, and it kind of frustrated everybody. And so it's probably for the best that she left. It's, as much as I liked watching her, I'd rather her be happy and the crew be happy over, just an actor I enjoy being in a thing. So it's sad to see her go, but ultimately it sounds like it's for the best. Favorite Star Trek crossover with Green Lantern and Planet of the Apes with Transformers? I'd probably have to say, I did really like the Green Lantern crossover. I thought that one was very smartly done. I think the Green Lantern crossover is a lot of fun. And hey, Amanda, welcome. But yeah, both Green Lantern crossover stories are a ton of fun, and I would highly recommend it. You're Council of Geeks. You say you're watching Harley Quinn the animated show. I think, did you just start that? Because I seem to remember you saying you hadn't watched that a week or so ago. Maybe I'm wrong, but I adored the Harley Quinn show, so I'm glad to see you're watching it. She did get injured on Ruby Rose did get injured on the set of Batwoman, but from what the reports say, and who knows, but from what the reports say, she didn't leave the show because of the injury. But I think she just left because she just didn't enjoy the work on the show. Though I'm sure getting hurt on set probably didn't enamor her to the experience at all. Steve says, my favorite part of the Green Lantern crossover is how quickly the GLs got over the fact that their entire universe was gone. Yeah, and I actually love the fact that they don't, in the Green Lantern comics that they have crossover Star Trek, they don't set everything right. And actually, I think at the second one, I believe, don't the Green Lanterns technically join the crew of the Enterprise? And they also say that the Green Lantern, that the guy who writes the Star Trek comics are canon within the universe of the Kelvin timeline. So that means that there, at some point on Star Trek Beyond, if you're watching Star Trek Beyond, there's some Green Lanterns hanging out down in the bowels of the Enterprise somewhere. So yeah, that's my headcanon, and apparently they're canon, according to Kurtzman, and I think Kurtzman said it, that the comic book line of the Star Trek comics are canon with the movies, and they actually reference a couple of the comics in the movies. I think they reference Into Darkness. They like McCoy references that he. McCoy references the fact that he had gotten bitten by a Gorn or had delivered Gorn babies, which does happen in the comics. So the comics are canon, and if Green Lanterns are on the Enterprise, that means there are Green Lanterns on the Enterprise during Star Trek Beyond, which probably would have been helpful during that movie. Hey, Wellington, I didn't see that you came in. Welcome. I'm glad to see you here. Though I'm going to wrap up in about 5 minutes or so, so any last-minute questions or anything you guys want to discuss, I'm down for the next 5 minutes or so. Let's see. I mean, how often has the DC's universe been rebooted? After a while, it gets into an old hat. I mean, comic books in general just reboot all the time. It got rebooted after Infinite Crisis, got rebooted after Rebirth. No, Rebirth didn't technically reboot the universe, I don't think. But New 52 rebooted the universe. The Flashpoint movies rebooted the Flashpoint comics rebooted the universe. So there's a whole bunch. I love in Justice League Unlimited, Jon Stewart changed into Hal Jordan because of time travel. Jon Stewart, nor Hal Jordan, time pheromone. I am up to speed. That's hilarious. I did like Justice League Unlimited. That was a great show. Oh, and thanks, Alden. It's good to have you here live. I appreciate that. I didn't finish Doomsday Clock. I read Aaron. I don't think DC Rebirth technically rebooted the universe. I think it was just like a reboot of the line, but it wasn't a reboot of the universe. Yeah, soft reboot. I didn't finish Doomsday Clock though. I don't know if Doomsday Clock rebooted the universe. I started reading Doomsday Clock week to week, but kind of got confused because they had so many delays. And so when I picked up a new issue, I was like, wait, what's happening again? I'm not entirely sure what's going on with this. So I figured I'd just wait until it was all out. And now that it's all out, I haven't picked it up because money. But I probably will pick up Doomsday Clock at some point and discuss it. And I did like that they made Superman a dad. Yeah, I agree. Superman, I really loved Superman Rebirth's storyline in that they made him like more directly a father, and I actually really liked his Superboy, the Superboy character that they gave him. And Aaron, I think you referenced that something happened. I needed to find out what's happened to Superboy because I fell off the wagon of DC Comics. I used to pick up all the main ones that I really loved up until about like 2 or 3 years ago. But I didn't, I kind of lost about 2 or 3 years ago, so I don't know exactly what they did with Superboy. All right, I'll take about 1 or 2 more questions. Let's see, I'll try and see if I can grab a question from somebody who haven't actually been grabbing questions from. Want to make sure I spread the wealth a little bit. Andrew, enjoy your reviews and seeing this live chat. Only just logged on and haven't seen your recent reviews of Picard. How would you sum it up in a 1-minute review? 1-minute review of Picard. I think the best way to describe it is great ideas. Not all of it pays off well. I think Picard probably had one of the riskiest Star Trek shows. And I think they actually had some of the best ideas I've ever seen on Star Trek. I really loved a lot of the ways, trying to stay spoiler-free here, I loved a lot of the things they did with Picard. I don't know if you know about that character, but a character from older Trek that appears. But yeah, there's so many great ideas, but in the end of the season, not all of them pay off super well. And I'm really kind of sad that they just didn't seem to have enough time to devote to all of the plot threads that they had going. I think that's probably my biggest problem is that they had so many great ideas and they didn't really have enough follow through on all of them, which is sad. What do you think of so I'll take 2 more and then I'm done. Shane asked, what did you think of the Star Trek Strange New World series news? I did 2 videos on that actually, so I'll save that question. If you want to see my thoughts on Strange New Worlds, I did a initial reaction where I showed my excitement. Then I did another video that was a bit more controversial, talking about just some issues of just considering the idea of diversity on Star Trek Strange New Worlds. I also discussed it a little bit in last week's live stream. So if you catch the first like 10 minutes of last week's live stream, I also talk about Strange New Worlds there. So if you're interested in my ideas on that, Shane, I would recommend that. Okay. Thoughts on disabled mental health representation in Trek and sci-fi? I'm going to do a video. I'm starting and I'm kind of taking down notes right now on a video for autistic representation in Star Trek. So I will have that. But if you're looking for some direct thoughts on my thoughts on mental health representation in Star Trek, I did a video about a year ago focusing on the character of Spock, specifically Spock's portrayal in Star Trek Discovery Season 2. So if you go back through my videos, I think about like a year ago, there's a video I did on Spock that's on mental health issues. So that's one of my one of my videos on that. Barclay and Tilly. It'll be on Barclay, Tilly, and Spock. Actually, I'll be also touching on Spock. So those are going to be the three characters that I'll be focusing on for autistic representation. All right, last question. Next question I see come up, I will answer and call it an evening. So. Any questions, or am I gonna wrap up? Oh, thank you, some random geek. I thank you so much for sharing that. Geordie LaForge is. You can definitely see how people see Geordie LaForge's autistic representation. I could definitely see that. I mean, there's a lot of autistic representation you can find. Like even 7 of 9, you could argue is autistic representation. Saru, you could probably even argue for as well. Andrew Morrison. Okay, this will be the last one I get in. So there's the last question. So this will be my last question I'll answer, and I think it's a decent one. How are you getting on in lockdown? And I think this will be sort of a nice one to end on. It's not perfect. I will say, and I talked about this at the top, I'm not sleeping all super well, perfectly. I'm kind of stressed and worried. I think probably the biggest stress is mostly just worrying about job situation and feeling like any job that I do get, whether I'm able to get the job that I used to have back, because there's a chance I might be able to get the job that I used to have back, or a new job, that it won't be something that I really love. And that kind of scares and frustrates me. So there's a lot of fear and a lot of worry. But out of all of that, I will say that I'm doing okay. I have all that fear. I all have that anxiety. I have that worry. But one of the other things that I'm very grateful for during all of this is this right here. Like the fact that I have an outlet to talk about stuff, to create stuff that all of you have enabled me to do. The fact that I can make a random video on a random subject and people seem to find it enjoyable has been very helpful to me. And getting to do creative stuff with, sorry to be, I don't know. I'm apologizing for it, but I don't know. I feel it. I always feel weird when I'm publicly kind, but I don't know why. But I'm very appreciative to Council of Geeks and Steve Shives and a bunch of other YouTubers and creators for making stuff with me. And also just to friends that I have here in the like physical space that I've met in person and things like that. Like I've been able to reconnect with a lot of friends that I hadn't reconnected with. So there's some frustrating stuff, some scary stuff, and things that I don't think are perfect. And kind of scare me. And like I said, sleeping stuff, but I'm always been a terrible sleeper. But there also have been some beautiful things too. Beautiful people, beautiful projects, and beautiful things. So I think that's probably where I'm at on it, trying to find the positive and trying to find the kind things. I know that that's not everyone's capable of doing that right now. I know there's a lot of people who have a lot harder, who have lost some people right now. And my heart goes out to all of you. I'm lucky enough that I haven't had anybody face this stuff directly who has been irrevocably harmed by it in terms of their health. So I know I'm very lucky, and I'm always trying to make sure I take appreciative of that. And I see everyone's messages in the chat, and I want to say thank you to all of you. You guys are all beautiful people, And I really greatly appreciate all of you so much. Like I said, it's just nice to see a community of people and see names popping up. So that is really wonderful. All right, before I start crying, I think I'm going to bid you all adieu. Thank you, everybody. You are all wonderful and lovely and beautiful people. And I look forward to talking to all of you further in the future. And thank you so much for supporting me. And thank you so much for just being you and for being amazing people. Have a wonderful evening. And I bid you all a good night. And I hope that you all live long and prosper.